And one of my new hires about a year ago, she started That's actually our sister.
I don't think we can do anything out of it.
But I mean, she'll have cars and leave in this area.
Yeah.
That'd be better.
And there's nothing tabbed. I think there's only one page of signature.
You're excited about that?
He didn't get my message. I was going to say his name. What she did. Alfonso was over there. I swear, when I saw her, she looked awful young. And like I said, she was a good manager of that lumber company that's out there in Johnson. Yeah.
Meeting back to order. Next will be number, go back to 8-4.
You want to do my information or what?
Yeah, we do that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, just two quick items. This Friday, as the chairman knows, Norcal EMS will be having their board of directors meeting. On the agenda is the review of the recommendations for the exclusive operating area for the county. I'm sure the chairman will be on that. I'll try to attend that by conference call as well. The other item, as most of you are aware, the state has passed some budget bills, and they're on their way to the governor. It's not the complete budget yet. We're still trying to analyze exactly what's included. It looks like there's some good news in there as far as the mandated costs for the county. But we'll be continuing to evaluate that. I'm sure Supervisor Alba will be getting more information at RCRC this week. I know Thursday on their agenda they've got an update on the budget trailer bills that are being contemplated about that. I may try to attend that portion of the RCRC meeting if I can fit it in my schedule. Those are the only two items that I have.
Okay. We will go back to county council. Report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are back to this is the issue we spoke of once before, and that is possible, not required. Possible only is the way I view it, at least. Amendment to the rules of procedure for board meetings. And what I've done is included for your reading enjoyment. The last three resolutions of this board related to procedure with an eye toward seeing how those have evolved. There was really a pretty narrow time frame between the second, the most recent and the next most recent. They were both adopted in 2012, and I think, although I didn't compare them too closely, the real difference is that set forth the addition of Section 1, Code of Conduct, in the more recent and current board resolution, essentially the Choose Civility Code of Conduct. And so that had not been part of previous resolutions. So, in anticipation of this discussion, county senior administrative staff discussed some of the issues set forth in my one-page cover letter, as well as discussing this matter at department head meetings. There are 10 items that were essentially identified for possible discussion. That's not an exhaustive list. It's intended to provoke conversation, discussion. I think the eye here is towards having a better public meeting and serving your constituents better. Number 10, integration of a video recording system. I can already report to you we're having discussions about that through the budget process. I think that was kind of the indication that we got when we were last here. And so for today's discussion, didn't really intend to go there necessarily. I think the consensus was that you were interested in that to the degree that it was affordable and we could otherwise provide for it. At least that's how staff took it. And so we'll be going down that road in the future. But items 1 through 9 remain, and we would like to at least provoke some conversation on those points here today. Because it's listed on the cover letter doesn't mean that I subscribe to it one way or the other. The only way that it got to this list is through discussion with multiple contacts. Multiple people expressed interest in these issues. These are not single-person issues. These are multiple people issues. Now, that being said, understand that some of the information sources were department heads or department staff or administrative staff. And I think everyone, to a person, understood that it's not their meeting. It's your meeting. And so, and they appreciate that. So, but they wanted to raise the issues, discuss them, and apparently I got tapped to do that. So, please don't shoot the messenger. Some of them are kind of provocative, like public comment. The 3 specific things set forth there, and I don't know how you would like to do this. If you would like to go through this 1 through 9, if you would just like to begin to have an open conversation, I'm not dedicated to any particular process. My hope is that today we have a discussion about these board rules, about any changes that could be made or areas that you might like to see modification to or not, and that I then retire from today's meeting with some direction, some indication as to what you want, and then try and draft that into what looks to be a working current resolution with the changes that you'd like, and come back in draft form and see if it's what you like. And almost akin to the marijuana cultivation ordinance, where we have a series of exchanges, and we tune it up as we go till we get to a point where we're satisfied, you're satisfied with what it looks like. That's my view on what I think could be a productive way to proceed. Of course, I'll take whatever direction you like.
I think it's okay at the board to start number 1 and then go on down.
Okay. So, did you have something?
Well, if you don't mind, I guess maybe we should just talk a little bit about the background of the meetings. And I think it's important to put things in context in terms of what the purpose of a board meeting is. It is your meeting. It's the board's way of conducting business. It's your only way of conducting business, in fact. And it's your meeting to do that. It's not a forum, to have 34,000 members of the public come in and conduct business. It's the board's job and role to conduct business. And that's, I think, sometimes lost. I know I'll probably be featured in several websites for saying what I'm going to say, but I think it's the fact that it needs to be put out there that it's you all that are conducting business. And you'll have people claim that it's not your meeting, it's somebody else's meeting. When in fact, I think it's clear that it is, and you've been elected to represent those other people, those other 34 or 5,000 people, and to conduct their business. So I think it's important to keep that in context as we go through this process of developing policies for the way we conduct our meetings.
Richard and I share that view, and I have, although articulated in a different way, I think a similar view, and that is that I think sometimes it is contended that this is the people's meeting. I view it slightly differently, and that is that it's the people's business being conducted by the people's elected representatives in front of the people. And that's maybe a fine point, but maybe not. So I don't think we're so far apart on that, but again, it's your meeting.
Right, and on public comment, I'm satisfied with what it says in here.
There is one point that came up, and if I may, I'd like to kind of go at one of them at a time. There have been, there's one point on your regular agenda that speaks to additions and or deletions from the agenda. And I believe that we have in the past afforded the public the opportunity to comment upon the addition to the agenda or deletion from the agenda of particular items. And while that is something that you are free to do if it's your pleasure, the law does not require that. There's a specific case on point.
You know, first of all, I just have to say that I agree in general with what you were suggesting, but I think the law also requires that the board, when it's conducting the public's business as the public's representatives in the setting of the board, that we have to entertain input and comment from the public. And I think if we go to page 9 of the existing resolution 12-39, towards the middle latter part of the page, it defines.
Can I catch up to you, Mr. Supervisor?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what page was that?
Page 9,
Thank you very much.
12-39.
Yes, sir.
It defines who the public is, and I think there's some misperceptions that exist out there that will continue to exist out there, and websites propagate that misperception, you know, and that's okay, because that's part of the public's right to do whatever they want. You have the right to be wrong, for that matter, under our constitutional law. The public is defined here is, the term public includes everyone except members of the board, county department heads, elected officials, or their designees collectively referred to as staff, and any authorized signatory party to a contract, agendized and pending before the board. Staff may address any items on the agenda if recognized by the chair. Contracting parties may address concerns to which they are parties if recognized by the chair. So in terms of defining that, we have, you know, there is a provision in here that the public, you know, can address the board for a period of 3 minutes. And so a lot of issue is made about staff presentations, and staff presentations can take much more than 3 minutes. Board members, in the debate we have with each other, can take more than 3 minutes. To Chapmanize, as Supervisor Kimball likes to coin, can take more than 3 minutes. Those particular dialogues are not defined as public under here and are not subject to the 3-minute rule. And I apologize to those who don't sit on the board that the fact that comments can take more than 3 minutes is irritating to them. The difference is that they have the right to speak for themselves for 3 minutes. The elected board members are representing several thousand individuals in their district, and I guess if you took all, 2,500 constituents times 3 minutes, you could have 7,500, I guess, minutes per board member per item, I guess, if you're going to exercise. And that's, the nature of the process. So I think we have to define that, or at least have that understanding that, the debate that takes place, the public has a right to give their input, and there are limitations, and the chair I think historically have been pretty liberal at letting people go beyond that 3-limit rule because if it benefits the discussion and the debate and the consideration of the board, I think that's important for the public's business. When it becomes repetitive and confrontational and is designed to disrupt the discussions versus enhancing the discussions, then I think the chair is within the purview of the ordinance or the resolution governing our meetings, has the right to shut that down. And you get into talk about disruptive behavior and the like. But I think it's important to note that who the public is versus who staff is, who the boards are, who the elected department heads. And there is a differentiation in terms of how the rules of procedure apply. And that has been sort of kind of lost over time. And I think it's important that we regain that focus.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chapman, do you, as to that aspect of the current resolution, do you find it acceptable as current?
Oh yeah, it has, and it's evolved. This is something that I think the original rules of procedure were adopted back in 1978. It was modified, I believe, sometime about 1990. The 1998 was really the first and real major overhaul of that because by then we had a CAO, because when we first had a rules of procedure, there were no CAOs, so you had to kind of define how all that kind of worked, the clerk's office and how the agenda is formalized. And the 98 one stayed in place up until basically 2012, and that's when we saw a couple modifications to how to move around and to conduct business. But for the most part, that definition of public and how that's worked council has pretty much been the standard for 30, 35 years now.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, again, the narrow question, at least as it relates to this item, is permitting public comment on additions or deletions. Public in the sense that the resolution contemplates, and public in the sense that Mr. Chapman just underscored, commenting on additions or deletions from the agenda. That was an issue that was advanced by some, at least to the point that it made the list.
Well, and I think, if I could add, because I think it's relevant and important, up until 1998, I think people pretty much observed that. 1998 was an election year, and we had a candidate in the 3rd District who was running, who used, he did his campaign at the podium, and he basically that spring, prior to the primary election, basically hijacked the board's agenda, and it became, our discussions basically were tied to and was defined by that person's, you might say, demand, in using the rules of procedure that were in place at the time, placing items on the agenda, coming to the podium, said, I want this talked about, and basically set the agenda, which consumed the time that we had and basically redirected the board's energy away from its ongoing business to dealing with the business of this one individual. And I don't have a problem saying who he is. He still lives here in the county, in Janesville, and his name was Bill Butler. He was very effective at using the rules and the podium to be able to direct the business. And so that's where the thing was amended to require that in order to get something on the agenda, there's avenues created to do that. So it wasn't something that was open-ended and directed from the podium. And there's been numerous attempts since to try to use that. I mean, it was something that people tuned into and saw as a great opportunity for a special interest to capture and control what we could do and how we could do it. And so that's what the purpose of these procedures are for. And I think public comment has sustained itself over the years in a fairly decent fashion.
And so to recap, Mr. Chapman, are you content with the
yes.
aspect of the resolution as it currently exists on that issue?
Yes, it allows us to take care of business in an appropriate fashion.
Is there any comment from public comment about the public comment part? Mrs. Spencer.
That was good. Mr. Burns has shown in the past no knowledge and actually contempt for the Brown Act, but this meeting is a public. It declares it as a public entity, therefore you're under the Brown Act, and we can comment on any agenda item. It's very clear in the Brown Act that we can comment on any item. And so if Mr. Burns, because of his lack of knowledge of the Brown Act, is looking to restrict or violate the Brown Act further, he's going to be met head-on with the law. So public comment, you can give men 15 minutes, and you can give women that you don't like 3 minutes. That's I'm willing to deal with because we do keep track of that stuff. But the Brown Act governs this. It always will until they do away with it. So County Health is willing to pay for Mr. Burns to go to a Brown Act seminar, even if we have to hire an attorney for him to go that specializes in Brown Act, because he either has no knowledge or he has total contempt for the Brown Act. So that's an offer we make to the board. We will pay for him to go to.
Thank you for your offer. Any other comments? Aaron, you have a comment?
Yeah, on the public comment, when we have the time, it says in here that it's a limit to 3 minutes. It can be at the discretion of the chairman. But when necessary, the clerk of the board shall operate the timing device. I don't think that's necessary. She's always busy down there. I think we need to change that to the chairman's designee, because it's going to be down in front of her. Bob's sitting right behind her. He won't be able to see the light himself to do it. So,
Are you taking volunteers?
yeah, Jeff said he'd be willing. So we decided no. But I think they make it to the chairman's designation rather than specifically to the board.
Yeah, that's it.
And I'm sorry, where specifically you're
It's
referencing?
B3.
Thank you.
Page 8, number 2.
Yes, we
At the very bottom, page 8.
Thank you. Okay, and so that would be the chair or the chair's designee?
Yes.
He's giving you an out.
But you need to also fix it on B3, because the same language.
Very good.
Page 9. Right, yeah.
Got it. Will do.
Okay, let's move on to the authority to remove from consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I have a suggestion for this item. Currently, the board policies allow for anyone, any member of the public, to pull an item from the consent calendar. That's obviously not a requirement of the Brown Act or any other regulation that we're aware of. I would suggest
Which item are you on?
two.
Authority to remove.
I would, and of course, the public, by virtue of the various laws applying, has the opportunity to comment on the consent calendar, but I would suggest that items be pulled from the consent calendar by only board members or other staff, rather than allowing the public to pull those. Of course, the public would have the opportunity to request a supervisor to pull something from the consent calendar, but that would, I think, alleviate some concerns that we have of members of the public that just want to frustrate the process and pull every.
Page 6 under item E is the consent agenda. It lists the people who can have deleted from the consent calendar. Board member, the CAO, a member of the public, or any department head.
Right.
So you want to delete a member of the public from that?
Yes. That would be my recommendation.
Wow.
So a member of the public would have to get a hold of a board member to pull.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when it came to determining the agenda, where you have at one meeting, somebody at the podium creating a whole list of things to be the agenda at the next meeting. It became a requirement that to get on the agenda, it required a board member to sponsor that item.
Well,
So,
what I would envision is that at the time the board takes up the consent calendar, there is an opportunity, of course, for any member of the public to comment, and a member of the public could come up to the podium and say, I'd like, for example, G1 or 2 removed for this reason at that time. Then it would be up to the board or any member of the board to say, yes, or if nobody acted, it would remain on the consent calendar. So it would, I think, just provide for, it would deny the opportunity for someone to just come up and say, I want to pull G1 through 20 or whatever it is to frustrate the process and make the meeting longer. But it would certainly give the discretion to the board, each board member, to pull whatever item they would like.
But before we adopt the consent calendar, anybody from the public has a right to comment on that action, which
Yes.
they do. So that's not precluded.
Right, not at all. The item 3, Mr. Chairman, was the application of the code of conduct to the public as well as the board. There was some, I don't remember how this came to light, how this originally came up.
This was superintendent of schools.
Well,
Richard Varney's thing that.
Choose civility, yes.
And I believe that the choose civility code of conduct probably accidentally just applies to, the way we've adopted it, just applies to the board members and perhaps staff, but not public. And I think the suggestion was that even though it's probably not very enforceable, to at least indicate that it applies to the
Indicate
public as
that,
well.
correct. But really, this came up, I do recall, this one came up from several people who, frankly speaking, thought that some of the behavior of some individuals that attended the meeting, not staff or board, frankly was not consistent with the same standard that they were obliged to violate. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, but that it was at least their request that the public be invited to adhere to the code that's set forth in Section 1 as well. And I think as CAO Egan correctly states, it's not enforceable unless there's a disruption, but it's a request, and that's about, I think, what could be said. It's a request.
I think this needs to be stated in there that,
It should pertain to everybody.
pertain to everybody. I mean, it's common sense, but it's too bad that we live in a society where we have to reinforce common sense on paper sometimes.
And so I can do that in draft form.
Let's, you table it or not table, but
Just find a number of people.
let's move on to,
To be honest with you, the nuances, the language of this here, I was always under the impression it applied to everybody. I didn't realize it was just the board member.
Probably an oversight when it was drafted.
let's go to, recognition committee presentation and proclamation, and then we'll come back to this.
Yeah.
Okay, need a motion to, approve proclamation. Honoring John Davinsky,
I would make that
regarding
motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second. Second, all in favor, say aye.
And since no one was thoughtful to invite Mr. Wilsinski to the meeting, I ran into him by accident last week and made sure he was notified.
That was good. That was good. Okay.
Did we vote on it?
We voted on it. I guess I get my glasses so I can see. John, how are you?
Doing great.
Good. Me too. Good to see you. Me and John started off Richmond School Board
That's correct.
back in the 70s. Yeah. Where is your proclamation?
Right there.
There it is. Okay. Proclamation honoring John Wazinski for his service on the Board of Directors of the Cedar River Fire District, Fire Protection District. John was appointed into the Cedar River Fire Protection District Board of Directors and served the capacity until he retired in 2014. And whereas John was an active member during his 31 years on the board, providing continuity and financial guidance to the board through many turnovers in membership during his tenure, and serving as the budget hawk guarding the district finances. He was kind of the budget hawk on Richmond School Board, too. And whereas John experienced many changes during his 31 years on the board, with an increasing population that impacted the resources of the district, starting with one small station and 2 engines, and growing to 2 large fire stations and 2 smaller stations with 9 engines and water tenders. And whereas John joined his colleagues on the other district boards to build a legacy that strengthens the mutual aid agreements and fosters